That's why that used to be not his name.
Really?
Yeah, I'll explain the history when we go into it.
All right.
We going?
Don't look at me.
Don't look at me.
You know what's not going is this internet again.
Yeah, that's why I just stuck with my phone. I'm not taking the chance. I can still see it from here, which is nice.
I'm going to punch...
I got it all up here, baby.
I'm going to punch some charter person in the throat.
Become Shazam.
Sick of it.
And instead of fighting bad guys, you just fight charter.
I fight internet providers.
You find people whose internet is going out, and then you find their local charter people.
Your internet's charged. Your internet's charged.
That'd be fantastic.
I would love it.
That'd be great. What up, punks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast. I am your host, Phil, and across from me is your boy,
Josh.
This week, whoa, that was a weird noise. This week, we will be discussing the new Shazam film.
Yes, we will.
Otherwise known as Captain Marvel. The other,
What?
The original Captain Marvel. I'll get into it. But yeah, we'll be talking about the movie, what our thoughts were, maybe go into a little bit about the DC universe, although that's proven to be a bad method in the past.
Correct.
I'll explain again in a little bit. But before we get into that, I saw on Twitter you said something about beating Borderlands 2.
Yes.
Is that something that happened?
2 a.m, well, 1:30 yesterday.
Were you playing with your cousins?
Yes. So
Okay.
there's been this whole saga. It was a very intense situation because at about, I think it was 10:30, Zach was online because he was at the,
Classic.
we caught up to him. And so we were all
So
at
he
the
was
same
ahead of
last
all of
mission.
you guys.
Yeah. So he was ahead of us. So we were all at the last mission and we got to the same part. So we just had the final,
How many hours
thing.
total is that game? Would you say?
We did a healthy amount of side quests, but definitely not as many as we could have. So to put it in perspective, at about, what was that? I would say, I would say maybe 40 hours.
Okay.
That
That's
we did
kind of what I
between
expected.
2 weekends. Yeah.
Like
so it was a
lot.
lot. It was a lot. It was a very rushed playthrough. So
It's a lot of content.
Yeah, we hit level 31, I think, by the time we beat the last boss. But yeah, so we finished it. So there was this whole saga at like 10:30. We're in it and we're doing the mission leading up to the last one. So it's like the second to last. And all of a sudden my internet here cuts out and like my router dies and I'm like, what is going on? So I was freaking out and I was super irritated and then, couldn't get the router to work again. And I had to pull out the old one and we plugged it in. By some miracle, I got one of our other ones to work for like an hour and a half. And so we got back in and at about 1:30, 1:45 last night, we beat it. So that's Saturday. That was Saturday night. So yeah, so it felt super good to finally just put it to rest. We kept talking about potentially jumping back in and doing it a different night, but we were right there. We were right there. We just needed to do it and get it done.
So now that you beat number 2, are you going to go back to 1 or play the pre-sequel, or are you off to 3?
That's a good question. I think my heart says I should go back to one of the old ones, but I think what made this run so much fun was playing it with 4 people. Like that. I'd always enjoyed it in the past, and Borderlands is just a fun franchise, but this time was very different. I felt I don't know, there's just something about it that clicked. I just got it. The loot was fun, getting the better guns, and the whole system felt more in my favor, where I'm getting better guns to help me beat these bosses, or just to be more manageable, or to just clear out these crowds of guys. And it was more exciting to see things like drop, and the amount of stuff that, I don't know. I have so many thoughts on just loot shooters now, having beaten 2.
It'll be an interesting discussion maybe that we can have around like when the third one comes out and when we beat that.
Definitely.
It'll be interesting to kind of examine like why these games for some reason work better for us than like
for sure
other loot shooters have, because they're similar but they function very differently, and maybe it's just because it's like not dependent on online play.
That's
like it's a single player game that's like built around co-op but isn't required. Right.
I think to me what it felt like is the rewards, you just are rewarded for playing the game. Like you do missions, you get EXP, you get hard to get guns. The whole system is not designed to beat other people, it's to beat the game faster, or just to get stuff that lets you do more stuff. And even if you the 4 of us playing together, like we got so many drops constantly. But what was awesome is, by the time we got towards the end, any item that dropped, even if it wasn't a gun I wanted, I can sell it for X amount of money.
Dude, I've already got like 40,000 in Borderlands 1, and I'm not even past the first area.
Right, exactly. But so all of a sudden it like clicked. It was like, oh, this is what a lot of these other games didn't do. Is because that used to drive me nuts in Destiny when I was playing the first one. Was like, well, I need money and I need all these items, but it's going to take me like 10 years to run around the field and get, all these like tinfoil leaves or whatever. But whereas this, it felt, okay, I got all these things. I can sell all these things. In the midst of just playing the game, I got even better stuff. So now it felt natural. Like it felt like a natural incline, or the incline over the course of everything was.
Well, and I think the fun part too is like the loot itself is tied into the lore of the world. So like every time you get a gun, like you can almost like visually tell the difference between the different companies. Yeah. Like I don't know if they're the same in TDOR, but there's Dahl and TDOR, and some of them are actually Gearbox. Yeah. Is like the brand, and like I think the first one actually had like a different tier of weapons. I forget what they're called, but it's like a even further, and they got rid of it for some reason. But I think it's coming back in 3.
Nice.
But yeah, you can like see the visual differences between them, and then you can kind of like it's kind of like that corporatism sort of thing. Like,
definitely.
There's just like it's just fun.
Yeah,
getting cool new guns, and like
for sure
they have like 50,000 different multipliers for different things, and it's like it's almost hard to like tell which guns are better because like this one has better damage, but this one has better accuracy, and this one does fire, but this one does corrosion, and like it's so much like fun different balancing issues and stuff. So
yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a big part of it is the game itself just is not dependent on just the loot factor in its own right. And I think that's what makes it so special. And having finished it yesterday, going into the final mission and playing the final mission, there was just this vibe like that. Out of all the online loot games I've played or tried, whether that was Division, Destiny, the little bit of Anthem I tried on the beta, this was like the first time running in, I felt, looking at like my cousin's characters and us, it just felt like, oh snap, like this is it, like we're running into this final fight. And it actually felt like a final fight, and the boss itself was incredible, and it was actually like a fun experience, and it felt like a final boss. And even the other bosses in the past, it felt like very fun, and it wasn't like there's dialogue going back and forth. Jack is making fun of you as all this stuff is happening. There's these curveballs with enemies just dropping in all of a sudden and all this stuff. It gets crazy.
I forgot that those games don't have difficulties. Oh, and or at least the first one
they're
doesn't.
Hard too.
And like in the first one, there's been a couple times where like it's like recommended level 18. I'm like, pfft.
You're like, whatever.
I'm like 15. I could do this, and I like try it, and like
you get
it was like this arena where you have to battle these skags, which I don't know if skags are in the second one. They're like these creepy little dog things, and it like the 2 doors would open up, and then 2 skags come out, and I'm like, easy, shotgun, and then like 4 alpha skags come out, and then a corrosive. I'm like, oh my gosh,
what is this?
And I'm like running around this arena being chased by all these things, and I'm like, this is insane.
This is insane. Yeah, so and that's the thing is I think the vibe of the world is just so strong, and the loot is fun, but there's something where it's like I'm not playing it for the loot, I'm playing for the characters and the story and everying, like
with the side benefit
the
of
way
loot.
that BioWare and EA was talking about Anthem, that sounded like what they were trying to do, and it's just almost like even more hysterical, especially with everything that came out this week with the
with
Kotaku.
Jason Schreier,
right? It just even more so. It's just like, man, people in the industry just don't get it, or like they think they know and they just don't. And so that I think playing it, I have a way bigger appreciation for Borderlands 2, because I remember back in the day when it first came out, everyone was super excited, and I remember playing it, and I think that was one of the first games you and I played together my freshman year.
I think so.
At my place when it first dropped, and it was fine, and I was like, it's another shooter and stuff. But I think seeing the market now, it really is like, holy crap, I would go back and play and like plug more hours into doing side missions and stuff, and just it's just deep, and it's rewarding in its own right, playing the game and having fun and laughing at the inside jokes and seeing, like one of the last missions of the game is named like Rocco's Modern Strife, and just things like that, like just all these
like
call
weird,
outs
like, little memes and call outs
exactly,
and
just all this stuff that it's just like this is just such a well crafted experience, not just a game and not just like a loot shooter, but it's a well crafted experience, and it's a lot of fun to play. So
I'm excited for the third one.
Oh, dude,
I'm so hyped. The cover is just so obscene.
It's so, and
it's just like this, and it's got like a holy hand grenade.
Exactly. It's just like, this is exactly what they're just bringing the heat, and I know
I'm really glad they didn't kind of like get into the hype of loot shooters and like kind of change their
Oh,
model.
100%.
I'm glad they're kind of sticking with their thing.
Definitely.
At least as far as we know.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks like it. And, so I'm excited. I think it's going to be a fun time. And I think it'll be a lot of fun playing it in this new stage of life to actually do it with other people and to make it a game that's more about.
I got it pre-ordered on
playing it
PlayStation, so hopefully I can play with you
dope.
guys.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. So that's that. So finally beat Borderlands 2. I can put it to rest. Put that on my mind. So that's great.
Yeah, buddy.
Per Jacob's recommendation
on
we
Twitter,
could call him
I think.
Jakey. Per Jakey's recommendation on Twitter, it was Jason Vareggi, I think is how you pronounce his name. I might have butchered it, but so he's an artist and he's Native American, and so he had tagged us in it, and he had done some covers and flipping through and having finished the comic. It looks like he did the chapter or the section. I guess it's a collection. So he did all the cover art for this character, but it's Red Wolf is the character. And so I picked that up, and it's Red Wolf Man Out of Time, and I really dug it. It was
so did he do the art in the comic itself too?
No,
or just
so
the
he
covers?
just did the covers.
Oh, okay.
But man, dude, I loved his style. Like just that, it's that Native American like geometric tribal kind of vibe to it, but he does it a lot with like other superheroes and stuff, and it's just very minimalistic in a way, but it's just got this flair to it that's super unique and super cool. So I love stuff like that. So the art itself is like very indicative of like other hero comics and stuff, but this was like one of the first superhero comics in a while. I don't want to say it reminded me of like Moon Knight, but I think in a way it felt more standalone, which is what the Moon Knight stuff that I've read recently, like last year, I think, kind of felt like. And I really enjoyed the story. So it felt a lot simpler and kind of small scale. And I think it takes place after like Secret Wars or something. I think there's some stuff that I missed. But because in this, it's like 18 something Cap dies, and so like Red Wolf is like taking over for him, and so he kind of comes in, but I really liked it. So they're kind of doing a new spin on the man out of his own time period in terms of the narrative, but I just enjoyed like the dialogue and the banter, and it had this little bit of espionage and kind of like it was fun. It was just like very simple, and it felt like, I think just seeing all the overcomplicated things that we've read recently, like I wasn't looking for like something to change my life, but it was just fun. It was a lot of fun. And I think I picked it up for like $6 or $7 on In Stock Trade, so it was well worth it. Yeah, and it was very quick.
Let's check it out.
Yeah, I read it in like an hour and a half, 2 hours, so it's a pretty quick read.
Nice.
It's like 6 issues, I think. But yeah, so Red Wolf, Man Out of Time, highly recommend that. And then I don't know what cued this. I think I was listening to Punk Rock MBA, and they were talking. He had another video about new metal, which I was like,
I haven't seen that one yet, but I saw it.
It's fun. It's good. It was encouraging reading the comments and being like, all right, people still like new metal, so I don't feel as bad. Like I shouldn't be ashamed, I guess. But he threw out other bands that have kind of pulled from the new metal style, and one of them was King 810.
I've
and I was
heard of
like,
them, yeah.
I forgot about them. Like they had a couple songs back in the day that were just brutal. But so I went back and I've been listening to. They had a new album that came out early this year or late last year, and I forgot how they're this metal band from Flint, Michigan, and like not like we're from like Michigan, but like kind of by Flint. Like they're straight out of Flint, Michigan, and very intense, very visceral, very violent, very brooding lyrics, but it's very grounded. It's almost as if someone from the hip hop scene in the 90s who actually like did grow up and experienced a lot of like gang type of stuff and like writing about it from the perspective of like, this is how it is and it's not good, is how their band writes about living in Flint and like the violence going on there. So it's very dark and very like direct, and like a lot of the stuff that is talked about is like just very like, yeah, like they kill people and I've shot at people and stuff like that, but it's not in a like, yeah, because I'm so cool that I do that. So there's just something very haunting and very like surreal about their music, where it's like, man, like there is a city out there that exists like this, and it's just very I don't know, it's like strangely captivating. So I went back through their library and was listening to them.
Cool.
So they're very intense and very non-conventional in their sound. So they don't do like a lot of vocals, but he almost has that like spoken word hip like rap, but not rap, just very rhythmic lyrics, but not with like an uber gravelly voice in a way that it's like, dude, this is what should have been playing in the Rendell fight scenes. Like this would have been incredible. But
Nice.
But it's pretty much the gist. I don't think I wrote anything else down. But yeah,
Cool.
Borderlands, Red Wolf, and King 810. So
Cool.
That's all I got.
Yeah, I don't have a ton either. I've been trying to focus most of my free time on writing and drawing and stuff.
Dude.
Trying to make progress on that stuff.
I listened to that Tim Ferriss and Neil Gaiman episode. That was
Good stuff, right?
That was intense. When he starts talking about
that episode kicked me in the pants. I've been working hard for like the past week or whatever.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's I can't remember the name of the guy he was working with.
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, just like how he was telling that story, and
I
just
know,
like
like
I
a
was just
super
like, dude,
heartfelt. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like that's intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great.
So yeah,
that was a great recommendation.
because of that and a couple other reviews I was listening to, I've been like going hard on the writing and trying to improve my drawing and
For
stuff.
sure.
But I've been reading a couple comics. I have a stack like the people can't see, but you can. That's like
a
this
big
high.
stack.
I went a little nuts at the library again. So, but two of the notable ones are Mind MGMT, which I think is pronounced Mind Management by Matt Kint. He does the art and the story, and it's kind of like this espionage thing where there's these people who have like weird mind powers, and like somebody's like somehow controlling people's minds, or like it's one of those comics where you don't exactly know what's going on, or like your perception of reality is kind of like tried.
Sure.
And so like it's kind of like this spy espionage tale where this lady is trying to like figure something out, and like things keep distorting around her and stuff. It's really trippy, and like
awesome.
His art style is similar to Jeff Lemire's, which is very like simple, cartoony, and so it kind of adds to like the trippiness of it.
Yeah.
So it's been super good. And then I started reading on Comixology because I've got the app on my phone now. I've decided to dig into digital comics for a little bit, and I found one called Fables, which I'm not sure when it's from, but the art makes it look like it's from like the late 80s maybe.
Sure.
But I could be completely wrong. But it's basically like all of the characters from like old fables and stuff, like Sleeping Beauty and stuff, are like living in the real world now because they got like kicked out of their homelands.
Sure.
And so they're kind of like living underground in the real world, and they call themselves fables, and then other people are just mundanes. And it's kind of like it's definitely like an adult comic.
Sure.
Like it's not adult in like,
it's like but Cinderella, like
it's not like a
cliche.
kid's. It's not a kid's story.
Ain't no
but
kid's story.
It's like the main character is I forget his name, something Wolf. He's like the big bad wolf or whatever, but he's like a human now, and he's like investigating a murder and that happened in their community. And it's like it's interesting because like all of these characters appear, and like it's clear they have these pasts that are based on like the fables, but like in their world, like whatever they did in their past got like there's a certain line in time where like that's not considered anymore. So like the fact that he ate other people and stuff as the wolf, like he can't be tried for those crimes because like of some pact that they made, I think, or something.
Sure.
So it's like they all have like this certain past, and they're kind of dealing with this identity crisis, and it's very interesting.
Cool.
I like things that kind of take existing things and like readapt them into other stories.
Definitely.
So like Watchmen or the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, like things like that, where it takes existing archetypes or characters and like puts them in different situations and sees how they act. So it's awesome. By Bill Willingham. I forget who the artist is, but that's the author.
Sick.
And then other than that, I started watching a little bit of the Batman the Animated Series again.
Nice. Because the DC, it's like 85 cents this month or something, or...
Well, I don't have the app because it's not available on PlayStation or Xbox yet. So like I have no way of getting it on my TV.
Using it, sure.
But I got the Blu-ray set for Christmas, like the collector's edition.
Nice.
And it came with a digital code, so I downloaded that on Vudu or whatever, and I've been watching it on there. But it looks, because I remember watching on Amazon before DC did their own thing, and it was like fuzzy, like that 90s cartoon style, but now it's like super crisp with the HD version. So
sweet.
It's really good.
Awesome.
So yeah, other than Borderlands, also I've been playing that. Like
and the game of the year for the first.
Yeah, they re-released the first one in HD. The game of the year edition. It comes with all the DLC and stuff, and it looks fantastic and plays really nice, and it's been fun so far.
Cool.
I've been putting a lot of time into it. Not like a lot of time, but I've been like taking my time with it.
Sure.
And like I've been doing like every side quest and kind of like trying to exhaust everything I can do.
Yeah.
Just to kind of take my time. And
Who did you go to play as?
The soldier guy, classic.
Oh, is it Roland? I think it was
Roland.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's Roland. There's the big buff dude. Brick. There's the lanky dude.
Mordecai.
And then there's the siren.
I forget
her name. I don't know. Are the characters the same?
I think it's Lilith is the siren.
It might be, yeah.
Yeah.
Are the characters the same in the second one?
No. So that's why it was cool to see. So like in 2, Mordecai and Brick are back, and Lilith and Roland, and then to see in the Borderlands 3 trailer, like Maya, who is one of the other, Lilith is also in it, but then Maya, who's the siren you can play as in 2, is in it. And then I don't know if I remember seeing any other characters, but it's, so it looks like it's going to be like a progression and adding on, and then all of a sudden they're going to become kind of set pieces that you get to learn more about. So that's going to be
cool.
Kind of like a cool
reverse.
The
thing about the first one is, I think the first one they were still kind of trying to figure out what they were doing, like stylistically.
Sure.
Because I read somewhere, actually, I saw a cover of, I think, Game Informer, where it showed like the original art style, and it looked just like terrible. Like It was just like, it was kind of like the Fallout 3 vibe, where like it's a post-apocalypse, everything's like green for some reason, like this weird dark green and brown palette kind of.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the cell shading, and it didn't have like the goofiness. And I saw that picture, and I'm like, if this is what the game would have been, it would have bombed. I bet.
Oh yeah.
Because it was just like, nobody wants that. But then I think somebody like overrode Randy Pitchford at the time, and
interesting.
Like he lost the vote or something, and they did the cell shading, which I think was to their benefit, because nobody really had done that. So
it just looks so cool. Like,
it adds so much to the world and the environments. Definitely. I think so.
For sure,
it's been a fun game. Anybody who likes loot shooters and you've never played Borderlands,
you have to. It's
such a fun experience, because you can play it by yourself and you can still get dope loot and all these cool guns and like different things.
Yep.
But then it's seamless between the transitions and stuff.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have the same sort of like lobby system and stuff that you might expect, but the loot's all there, the story, the questing, and all that stuff is all there. So it's super fun.
For sure. Tight.
So yeah.
You ready for this?
That's everything. So
Ballin'.
I went back and listened to part of episode 41.
For sure.
I skipped through like the first 50 minutes because so basically
we were young and naive 30 episodes ago.
Yeah. So a friend of the show, Mark, I think he was more hyped than we were on Shazam.
Yeah.
He was the one who asked the original question in episode 41. So if somebody wants to go back and listen to that, maybe don't actually.
Yeah.
So he had asked questions about like kind of what we thought about Shazam and how we thought it was going to do in the DC whatever, and basically I realized that we only talked about Shazam for like 5 minutes in that episode.
Sure.
And the episode's called Shazam Gesundheit or something like that.
Yep.
But we talked about Shazam for like 5 minutes, and then we sidetracked to like Venom and Aquaman, which hadn't come out at that point.
Yeah.
And I think the two things that I got out of that were, one, my hope in that episode was that Shazam would add kind of like the lightheartedness a little bit to the DC universe, because up until Aquaman came around, we didn't have like that like goofy campiness of superhero movies that you almost expect nowadays.
Sure.
Whereas DC had been traditionally doing like the Zack Snyder thing, where everything's like dark and brooding, and we're still in the late 80s of comics.
And we're like corny but angry.
Yeah. And so like in that episode, I basically said within those 5 minutes that I hoped it would like add like a lightheartedness to the DC universe.
Sure.
And then the second thing I noted from that episode was that was before Aquaman had come out.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the conversation around DC between Aquaman and Shazam coming out has shifted dramatically.
Yeah.
Because even in that episode, like, we sounded like we were just dead
ornery
from DC. Like, it was kind of like DC is gone, long gone, dead. Like, there's no hope, basically. And like, even you weren't very excited for Aquaman. You're like,
I was not.
I probably
yeah.
I think I had to convince you that like it was worth seeing or something.
Yeah.
And I think since Aquaman and Shazam have come out, I think the narrative has shifted a little bit. Like, they're by no means better than Marvel, in my opinion, but I think people are talking about DC positively again.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So those were the two things that I got out of that episode, that things are a little more positive now, and DC is maybe looking up again. So
for sure.
And then along with that, I did some research on the history of Shazam. I could be wrong, but so basically in the late 30s, I think it was 39, there was a comic company called Fawcett, I think, that owned Shazam. and DC sued them because Shazam was basically Superman at the time. And if you thinking about that now, it's like, okay, like every superhero is basically the other superheroes. But at the time, if Superman was the only superhero and then somebody else created Shazam, it's like you couldn't think of anything else other than the exact same thing, other than the fact that he's a kid instead. So DC sued him, and basically, I think in the 50s, they like were fine, okay, we'll stop like using this character.
Yeah.
And then I think he was kind of dormant for like 20 years, and then in the 70s, DC revived him and brought him back as a character. But at that time, Marvel was a thing at that point, and had created their own Captain Marvel, which was the original Captain Marvel, like the guy one.
Yeah.
And so then they started calling him Shazam. Like they didn't use the name Shazam they didn't use the name Captain Marvel in any like marketing anymore, but they still called him Captain Marvel in the comics. And then I think the comic was called Shazam or something like that. And then I think in 2012 or 2011, Jeff Johns in the New 52 run, that was when they officially like changed his name to Shazam.
Okay.
And like, so it was actually very recently
wow.
that like Shazam became the official like licensed name.
Yeah. Interesting.
But up until then, he had been Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
So that he's the original Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Because I don't even think Marvel was a thing at that. Well, it might have been around the time.
Sure.
But the name's
very close.
Yeah. So
cool.
That's kind of the history. I might have gotten it a little bit wrong, but I looked up a couple articles last night because it's very confusing and there's a lot of illegal stuff. So, but I don't think Marvel ever actually like sued DC over the name.
Over Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
As the name.
I think DC like just decided to do it because they didn't even want to take the chance. But 2011, you got to think like, man, they waited a long time to.
Right. Well,
you think Marvel would have done something by then. But I don't think Shazam was a very
could that have been also when they were kind of having was their comic run kind of having some issues? Because I know there's a stretch where
Captain Marvel.
No, that Marvel itself was
the
hitting
90s.
The tubes. Was it the 90s? So I mean, so that would have been farther along than for that to be the reason that they didn't go after him. Because I could see them being like broke, and they're like, the last thing we're gonna do is pick a legal fight with. And
from what I could tell, I don't think. During like that 70s time when he was resurrected, I don't think he was a very high selling book, Shazam.
Okay.
But in the 30s, the reason DC sued was because Shazam was outselling Superman at the time.
That makes sense.
And so they're like, you kind of stole our character, and now you're outselling us. So,
because it's more interesting. But
yeah. So that's kind of what leads us to this movie today. And it's kind of interesting because due to that history, like he hasn't necessarily been like at the forefront of the DC universe, at least in modern pop culture comic sensibilities, and it's interesting that they chose him as a character to make a movie out of. But I think it ended up being like the perfect character to kind of spark that moment of like, oh, DC can make good superhero movies,
and
like that are fun, and you want to see them 2 or 3 times and go back and kind of like you want to wear the shirt or the hat or whatever.
Exactly. And just to throw in too, because I don't want to dwell too much on, I think that was one of the pitfalls of our last episode is we were kind of, it shifted specifically from Shazam just because we didn't know a lot into discussion of the Marvel universe, and based on what we'd seen, or not Marvel, DC, based on what DC had already done, it was like, okay, well, this is kind of what we're assuming from this. And having seen Shazam, it really makes me wonder if it's not necessarily DC itself, but it's the directors that they've hired, which makes me think it's Zack Snyder. Who's
honestly,
the problem.
I think it's Zack Snyder, and
and seeing his comments about like Batman, we're like big babies, like Batman obviously kills people. You're like, dude, like you don't get it, like you don't understand, because I think literally he has not, or at least I'm assuming what I didn't read any articles actually digging into what Snyder's quotes or his argument was. But essentially, to me, it just is stupid because you're negating.
His main argument was basically not that like Batman has to kill, but more that like you'd be dumb to think that he hasn't ever killed anybody, because like, and basically that's what he tried to portray in the movie was like, because of the way Batman is reckless in that certain sense, like he must have killed somebody in the collateral damage. But like, I think the way he portrayed Batman was very different than Batman is portrayed in the comics.
I would agree.
And I kind of liked his portrayal, to be honest. I don't think Batman can't kill people. I just think like the way he went about it was just poorly done.
Yeah, and I think it was blasé almost.
He tried to be both Batman at the same time.
Yeah.
Like he tried to be the one that has these principles, and like it. We're getting into the DC thing again,
right?
But yeah, I think it's the directors.
Because all of a sudden it's starting to click where it's like, interesting. I never thought of that as the issue, because all of a sudden it was like, well, all these parent companies and they're like licenses and they're just But then you hear the thing about EA, and like I listened to Angry Joe's whole recap on the Anthem stuff that came out from Kotaku, and all of a sudden it was like, no, BioWare screwed around for 7 years and then they had a crunch, and it's like. Interesting, because I would say even I was listening back to bits of our Captain Marvel, and that was kind of our same thing. Is it's like it wasn't like inherently bad, but they're just things that is like, what happened? Like this is, and then it's like, oh, but this is a new director team. Like this isn't the directors from other Marvel movies. Like it wasn't like they brought exactly. Like it wasn't like they brought one of the other top tier directors into it. It was like a new squad, and then you see. Oh, the Wonder Woman director was not the person who did Justice League and Batman v Superman, and then same thing with Aquaman, and now this. And so part of me, it's kind of like maybe it's Zack Snyder, and you suck, dude. Like you're just
not release the Snyder cut.
Yeah, it's like actually do it, because it might prove that
he's not good. Yeah.
Right, and
dude, his fans are rabid. Anytime WB tweets something, like if you look at the comments, every comment is just hashtag release the Snyder cut. I'm like. You people have no chill. You need to
stop. And it's not to say like, oh, he's trash, he should never make films. But I think just seeing how he's acted after the fact. He should just
keep his hands off superheroes.
Yeah, and just seeing how he's acted after the fact, it's like, dude, like you were probably the reason that everyone was ditching DC movies, is because if everyone's expecting Batman v Superman if they didn't like it, or Justice League if they didn't like it, they're probably not going to go see other stuff. But then all of a sudden, Aquaman comes out and people are like, this has so much vibe and it's super dope. And like same thing with Wonder Woman. It's like it actually has a functional story and an interesting character arc. It's like, oh, interesting. Yeah. The two films that did not involve Zack Schneider, those are the ones that are well received.
I find it interesting between Shazam and Aquaman. The directors were horror directors.
Yes.
Like I don't know what the decision making behind that was, but it worked so well for some reason.
And to shout out, sorry to cut in quick. So to shout out, I've like alluded to him like 5 or 6 times and I feel super bad, but David F. Sandberg was the director for Shazam, so he was the actual mind behind it. And so if you want an interesting take on just kind of the film industry and stuff, Film Riot, who's a YouTube channel, highly recommend them if you are into like video effects and just learning how to do like video stuff. They're a very fun channel, very well put together, and they've been doing it for years. So they have a podcast called Film Riot, and I think it's like their very first episode, but it's directing low to big budget films with David S. Sandberg. So that was where
they have an episode with him?
Yeah, so that was where I had first gotten excited about Shazam, is because he was just describing like, here's all the challenges that you're facing working on like a small indie film versus like a Hollywood budget, and he's like, it actually isn't that different, it's just more people, and you just kind of do that. He said where it gets interesting is actually working with the material that you're doing, because there's like more stuff coming in and all this stuff. But very knowledgeable guy and very fun to listen to. And that was where I first got excited about this movie, is it was hearing him talk. It was like, they're not doing it just they're not going to be doing just a conventional film. And then walking out of the theater, I was like, that was exactly what I was hoping.
And I think it's interesting thinking about the marketing, because like going into the movie, like I remember sitting like half an hour before I was going to see the movie, like I was sitting on the couch next to Evan, and I was like, I feel so much anticipation for seeing this movie. Like I couldn't sit still. I was like, I don't know what to do right now, because like I'm so excited to see this movie. And I think the reason for that was because like they gave us almost nothing in the trailers.
Yes.
Like if you watch the trailers, all they gave us was like the tone of half the film.
Yeah.
And like and they kind of established the characters a little bit in the trailers, but like they gave us almost no story stuff. Like the only story stuff I knew was stuff that I read on Reddit on accident like a week before, and like kind of had an inkling of some things that might happen. But like for the most part, I was like, I have no idea what to expect, and it's almost the same type of anticipation that Endgame has.
Yes.
And this movie has no 10-year build up to it, and I felt the same level of anticipation for it, because like it, like the trailers just gave us a little, like just a tiny little nugget of what might happen. And so I think the marketing for this was like the first like just home run in the park, because like it was fantastic.
No, and that's a good point. And that would be a whole, we should literally do an episode on that, but just discussing like how much I've steered clear of anything from Endgame just because I'm like, the hype.
I've seen all the trailers, but like they give you nothing.
Right, and I think that's to its benefit because I
Yep.
think all of a sudden if it's like, oh, this guy's in it, this guy's doing this, it's like, but it's just there's so little that it's like I don't know if Hawkeye is Ronan Hawkeye, whoever that is, and like
Honestly,
I don't know if like all this
Scarlett
stuff
Johansson's
is this.
hair is like different in 3 different of the trailers, and like the timelines are confusing, and some of them Tony's here and some of them Tony's in space, so it's like I don't think they're giving us anything relevant, like
Right.
or anything that's gonna. I think they're steering us away, and like
Well, they're just like it's this bait and switch of like, oh, is it here? Is it this?
yeah,
It's
I feel like
what's
the
gonna
time,
happen? What are you
like
gonna
they're
do?
messing with the timelines.
Oh my goodness!
And I feel
yeah.
like Shazam did that in a smaller sense.
yeah,
And I think it worked so well because trailers today are just so bad at like spoiling things, or kind of like you just like, oh, I just got the whole plot basically in
exactly.
the trailer there. So
definitely.
I think that was the first part about this movie. I think that worked really well
For sure.
in its favor. So
Yeah. So diving into the actual film.
yeah, let's actually talk about the movie.
Yeah. My first thing is one. It's got I think like when we left the theater, it's like a 92
It was 92
on Rotten
when we left the
Tomatoes.
theaters.
So I would assume it's probably in the 90s, maybe high 80s, if I don't know if anything's dropped.
Let's see.
But what was fascinating is I remember you saying that the critics score was really high and the user-
91% for reviews for critics,
Sure.
and 90% for audience.
Okay. So it's universally enjoyed. And so hearing that, I was like, this is going to be fantastic. And my overall spoiler-free vibe is absolutely go see it. It is one of the most fun superhero movies. And there was part of me, and I'd have to really think about it, but there was a level of like, this is maybe one of the better ones, even looking at Marvel films too.
Oh yeah, I would rank this probably above half of the Marvel movies.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And just it was just so well done. Like it just was like this was just a fundamental story. It was fundamentally made just with there were payoffs. The payoffs were actually paid off. The illusions and things that they pointed to actually were relevant. The narrative things were actually interesting. There was character growth. There were challenges. There was progression. I loved everybody that was in it. Every single family member, every single character, the villain, everything just fit. It fit.
Meshed. Yeah.
Yeah, it just worked together. And I think, I'm sure that part of like my excitement was that this isn't as bad as any of the things that we've watched in the past like 4 weeks. And so this
we've had a
just
run.
felt incredible.
Yeah.
But it really was like it was just so cohesive. And I think the story too, we'd been talking about how past movies we've just reviewed and discussed were very large in their scope in terms of the story it was trying to tell. And I feel like this had some elements that were like bigger world, but they didn't try to tell you, like they didn't pull a Man of Steel where it's like, this is the lore of the entire existence of your people and all this stuff, and this is how you're gonna go do this. And it was just like,
it was very grounded.
Grab this staff. He's like, really? That's gross.
He's like, dude, I'm not gonna touch your staff.
No, I'm not touching, so, and just like everything was just, they paid attention to the stuff that was interesting, and the stuff that should have been superfluous and just kind of there, like, went away. And that was it. Like, it didn't, and I think that was the weird thing, is it was like, you did it. You actually, like, paid attention to the stuff that was, and you dwelled on the things that helped me understand who Billy is, and, like, who his family are, and what this villain is about, and why he's doing what he's doing, and, what this clash is going to look like. And it just was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you actually dwelt on the interesting things. Like, all the things that made this movie interesting were the things that were spent the most time with. So, but that's just kind of general overview. I'm curious, like, what really grabbed you from
I
think over the top.
I think trying to be spoiler free, then we'll get into the spoiler
Sure.
territory. I don't even know if we've spoiled anything yet.
I don't think so. He has a family.
You'll find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like overall the movie definitely deserves the rating it got, and like I said, I think it even beats a lot of Marvel movies.
Definitely.
In the sense that it was both an origin story, but also like a superhero story, or like a coming of age story mixed with like a superhero story, kind of like learning how to be a hero in a sense. And like they meshed those two ideas into like one cohesive idea. And I think I agree with you in the sense that like, though the world and the scale that this could have been was grandiose, I think they really honed in on like what makes this character, and what makes him different from other characters. And I think they really focused on that the whole movie, and every scene pointed towards like that conclusion in a sense. And I think because of that, it felt like really small in scale, but really large in like emotional and like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that was, like we've talked about the past 4 weeks, like simpler is better, basically.
Yeah.
And I think you and I are almost learning some like storytelling techniques from this.
Absolutely.
Like, draw it down, focus on the things that are important. And I think this movie really focused on everything about this character that was important.
Yep.
In a sense.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I think it just nailed it all the way till the end.
Yeah.
And I was just like smiling the whole time.
Yeah,
like,
it was just
like,
so much
man,
fun.
this is fun. Like,
Definitely.
this is what superhero movies are supposed to be like.
Yes.
And like, I've been waiting for DC to like do this, and I'm really glad they finally did.
And
it,
they just destroyed it. Like and like you said earlier, this was one of the better superhero movies across brands. Like it just is.
Yep.
Like it's great. It's just, I was laughing so hard. There were moments that I just was like, I had that big grin, and there were moments that I was just like, we're so little, but you could just tell that someone who like they were like, throw a Street Fighter nod in here, and you're like, yes. And it's like, and of course it just like, again, the payoff of like, so we'll just dive into spoilers because I'm gonna get too excited, but I mean, like something as simple as like one of so Billy Batson is a foster kid, and there's kind of a narrative behind that, but then he moves in with this foster family, and one of the his foster siblings is this little, I think Eugene was his name.
Yeah, Eugene.
But he's this like gamer kid, and the first introduction is he's sitting on the couch like zoned out playing.
He's like,
this
I
game.
hope you die.
He's like, die, you die, and he's like yelling, and they're like, hey, no games after dark. He's like, it's dark outside, you know. So like little things like that were like, all right, this is the gamer kid nerd. And so at the end of the movie, there's this scene. So now we're diving into spoilers, but at the end of the movie, there's this scene where Billy conjures his powers, and then they are bestowed on his foster siblings, and there's this dope like family Shazam fight that goes on. And as Eugene and his powers are like, he's fighting, he's like, Hadouken, and I was like, yes, like, oh, that was incredible. Like, it was so small, but just that little shout out to like, the reason it's perfect, and it just is such a fun nod, is it's like, it isn't Billy saying that, it isn't one of the other siblings saying that and like getting a cheap, you know, like video gamer shout out. It's the video gamer kid who we've known since the very first time we met him. That's just his world, and he's you know, quoting Ryu, and like it was just such a fun capture of like, these were the kinds of allusions and little jokes that they did it not just as a whole, or they didn't just let anybody say something or reference something or do something. It was very specific people, and I think because they were so selective, it made those moments even funnier. Like the fact that you had this guy, this like fake Santa Claus guy who just kept like in every single scene is like running, and he's like, run, you know, and then
at the end he's cursing at the TV, and she's like,
yeah, that was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. Is they're like, and you know, an eyewitness of the thing, and it's like this guy, the same Santa guy, and he's like, it was nuts, man. There was like stuff flying. There's these like demons in there. It's just like, and he's like cursing, and you're like, it was just such a fun payoff of like, this is exactly what I would hope that a fun, lighthearted, more joking movie that's about kids would
and
do.
I think that was one of my favorite parts about it, is like, on a deep level, like a lot of the movie was like corny in a sense.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think the movie knew that it was going to be corny. Like anytime you have like kid actors being like the lead actors, you have to almost like lean into that in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think like they really understood that, and they really like, all of the jokes were nuanced in a sense that like they worked within the, like you're saying, within the context of who the characters were as people and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of really good payoff with that.
For sure.
Like when he's in the cave with the staff, and the guy's like, and he's just like,
grab my staff. And he's like, ew, no.
Can I go home now?
Yeah.
And like all of the characters just had like the right reactions at times.
Definitely.
Like that. So that was one of my favorite parts about the movie, is just like the humor. And
that's a good point. Is I think the humor, I think the humor came naturally, and it's so weird to say that, but I think when you look at what a lot of movies and TV shows and stuff are doing, I think when we're watching films and we're watching shows and we have an off reaction to something where it feels weird and we don't really know why, I think that's one of the things, is our brain is telling us that person would not react like that, or like, why did they do that? And unless that's explained, we're like, this is dumb. Like, you just forced this person to say this joke to get a funny laugh, but it like wasn't funny because that person would never say this, you know. Or like the fact that Billy and I keep forgetting what his other brother
Yeah, I can't remember his name now.
Gosh dang it. I almost want to say it was Eugene, but Gloria's like, he was my favorite. My favorite.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites too.
Yeah, but the fact that they're doing all these juvenile jokes and they're like making fun of each other and they're like laughing and they like everything that they're doing and laughing and making fun of is like that fits because that's exactly what a 15-year-old kid would do.
Yep.
And these are the things that they would try to do. And these are the things, so one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, and I'll dive back in a later point of why this movie is so good, but the gas station scene. And I know that bits and pieces of that scene have been shown in trailers, but that scene was one of the ones that just encapsulated exactly half, like you said earlier, half of what this movie was. And just the hilariousness of they're like, oh dude, you're like a grown up. Like let's go see what he like walks in. It's just hard cut to him, like center frame, and he's like, I would like one of your finest beers, please. And then girl like points and he's
just
like
looking at her phone. She's like,
thanks. And he like walks and just like then the robbers come in and they shoot him and he's like, oh dude, you're invincible. He's like, wait, is it the suit or is it you? Shoot him in the face. He's like, yeah, shoot me in the face. And it's just like how they literally do it. And then he's like, gets shot and he like pauses for a second. He's like, dude, that kind of tickled. It's just like this like weird buddy thing that's going on, and like it didn't like get awkward or weird where he's like, ha, no, I'm gonna beat you up. It was just like they just captured that these kids who are so obsessed with just superheroes and like this awesome raw power all of a sudden are just geeking out and they're just having a blast with it. And so at the end of it, they're like, hey, thanks for saving you. And he's like got a beer and he's like, cheers, man. And they like, because they get it, and so they like clink and then they drink and they immediately spit it out. They're like, this is awful. Hard cut, the exact same moment, and they're walking out with like Twizzlers and Doritos and Mountain Dew, and I was like, yes.
And they have Red Bulls. I'm like, let's go.
I was like, that was just so perfect. Like that was one of those things of like, that's the payoff of the humor is these characters. No, they're not hard party animals, and they're like, yeah, of course they're curious teenagers who want to know what beer tastes like. But they're not like, oh, now we're going to like smash beers and like, go crazy. It was like, that was the hilariousness of the moment. It's like, no, these kids have set themselves up to be.
The fact that,
exactly. Like they're teenagers and they're going to drink beer and be like, this tastes awful. I want a bunch of Mountain Dew. And so like and they come right back out in the exact same moment.
Well, yeah, I think that the whole montage scene to me, like when he first got his powers and they're kind of testing out and they're going through the cards and stuff, like that whole scene was just perfect in my opinion. Like where they're trying to figure out, or when he puts him in the box and it says,
and he lights him on
and it
fire.
Says like teleportation test or something, and then he crosses out secret fire invincibility test, and he pops out. He looks so confused, and he's like, dude, where'd the fire come?
Yeah,
and then he's like, oh, and he starts running.
Yeah, that was incredible. Trying to think of
and he's got like a YouTube channel, and it's called like Hero Manager, and like I'm like, this is totally what a kid would do if they got a superpower.
Exactly,
like, it's stupid. No, like nobody in their right mind should have done this, but like they're just kids, like having fun.
Yeah, exactly, and they're like
they kind of leaned into that, and like
definitely
Like they understood like what a kid who basically became Superman would do in that situation,
and they captured it. Like they didn't all of a sudden. I could see what an amateur reaction to these things would have been is, oh, and because he has superpowers, now he's instantly imbued with all this responsibility that he has
a good grasp of morality and like what's right and wrong and what he should do, and he should be selfless and like and
it wasn't at all, and
he became very selfish,
and it took its time to let that happen, and I think that was why to me it was so incredible. It's this, you could just tell that this was in the hands of someone who made other films that were about good story, because it could have easily become about this kid getting superpowers and fighting bad guys, but it didn't. It was about Billy Batson realizing, okay, I am a teenager, and just because I'm like goofy and do stupid stuff, and even at the end, he doesn't become this like perfect executor of awesome superhero stuff. He's still absolutely himself, but all of a sudden he kind of gets it a little bit more. But his
character arc is kind of like not so much learning about how to be a hero, but learning how to like trust people, basically.
Exactly.
Like learning how to trust, like, see that family is important, and having a circle of people that you can trust is a big thing.
Definitely.
Like
and
the whole scene where he like did the hand thing, I was like,
you're like,
don't make me cry.
Yes, hands in, Billy, hands in. But it was things like that I was like, man, they actually just told a good story. Like there was a progression. There were little things that they did that I think were well done, and I think it was weird because there were almost moments that I was looking for where I was like, where could they have effed this up? And where could they have done wrong? I think one of the big ones is he spends a lot of the movie looking for his mom, who, you know, you find out in the story, like, basically lost him at, like, a carnival and then left him and just abandoned him. And that was intense.
I know. I've kind of had a hunch that that's what happened because I was like, Evan, like, turned to me when in the first flashback and she's like, who just loses their kid and doesn't find them? And I'm like, I don't think that's really what happened. I
exactly.
think that's
and then
his
you
memory
find,
of what
right,
happened.
exactly. But I think to me, that was like numero uno of that, what could have been a very amateur way of executing the mother-son reunion is, so he finds her and his foster siblings find her and he goes to her and, you know, it's been built up the whole movie. It's like, yes, he's going to find her as long as she's not dead. And like, yeah, he's going to, and so he goes and he finds her. And she's like, and he's like, Mom, it's me. And she's like, oh. And you're like, this lady sucks. Like, even in that response alone, like and I think that was exactly what an amateur would have done, is the exact opposite. She would have been like, oh my gosh, Billy, where were you? And I missed you this whole time. And
I think that moment is that moment in the hero's journey where, like, where the hero gets what they want, but it comes with a price.
Yeah.
And basically in that moment, he got what he wanted in that he realized, like, who his real family was. But it came with the price of realizing that he was looking in the wrong place the whole time. Well, and they very easily could have flipped that and it would have ended poorly, I think.
Definitely.
And I think you're getting at that right point.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that, so his mom comes out of her apartment and she's got some, you know, wild boyfriend who's like yelling at her or whatever. Yeah. And you can tell that she's disheveled and not really about it. And they start talking and then you see, oh, she did just straight up leave him and it was because it was a hard time. But to me, it was like, they could have even still, I don't even think it was the fact that she didn't start crying, because she could have still been like crying and weeping and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I left you. And like, I'm so glad you're here. But then it's like, it wasn't like Billy was like, wait, you don't actually love me. You're just regretful of this. It was just like, she straight up shut him down. And I think
now's not the right time.
She was like, now's not a good time. And I was like, that sucks, dude. Yeah. Like, but that moment was like, yes, you just get it. You understand. Like, you didn't take the easy route, and the easier route would have been him coming back, her being like, oh my gosh, where were you? I missed you. I left you, and I regret it, and I'm so sorry. And then him being like, wait a second, you didn't actually love me. I'm going back to the actual people who really love me. And then him like going back and having this whole thing. But she shut him down almost in a way that he didn't have a choice. Like, he didn't have a choice to say, oh, well, I'm going to go back to the people who actually care about me. It was, oh my gosh, my mom just told me straight to my face, like, now's not a good time for me to like be a part of her life. It's like, F this lady, I'm out. Like, I know there's been these two foster parents who've had me for like 2 days that I've been in their house, and like they're chasing me across the road trying to find me. And so then even the emotion at the end when like the mom is getting emotional of like hands in and Billy being thankful, it's like, yes, that pays off, and it doesn't feel cheesy because it's like it's clicked this entire movie of like, this couple cares about these kids. These kids care about each other. Billy doesn't care about them. Billy learns to care about them because the thing that he wanted, exactly like you said, with the hero's journey, it didn't love him back, which was his mom. So that was an easy scene, I think, for them to really goof it, and they did.
I think they nailed it. So, I honestly thought he was gonna like, because they were like, the guy was yelling and stuff. I thought it was gonna be like an abusive situation, and he was gonna Shazam it.
Yeah,
but no, they left it and kind of. In that moment, like, let you breathe in a sense of like, oh, he got what he wanted, but it wasn't like the way he wanted it.
Yeah,
like he got the resolve that he had been looking for his whole life, and it wasn't the answer he wanted. But in that moment, he also realized there are people who only, like you said, only have known me for 2 days, and they love me like they've known me my whole life.
Right.
Like, how can I talk? And I think he even said like, I'm gonna, I have a family who loves me or something like that. And I was like, ooh. Yeah. And like, he just walks down the hall and you never see her again. And I was like, that very easily could have been a terrible scene.
Yeah.
Like, and I think the way that they did it was so perfect, and it just paid off so well. And then they have the whole payoff where he's fighting with his family, and like he's like fighting this dude with like an eye and stuff, and he's in the cave, and like they come in there with like lamps and stuff, and they're like give us Billy back.
Yeah, give us back Billy.
You kids are idiots. Like, this dude could kill you in one hit of lightning or whatever. Right. But like they've only known him for a week, and like they like, because of the way their parents loved them, like they were willing to show that like level of love to another person who wasn't willing to receive it in a sense.
Right.
And like in a way, the way we're talking about it is like it's a very simple movie, but it's also very complex.
Absolutely.
Like,
100%.
all of the themes about like fostering and like and love and relationships and like individuality
who you fight for,
and like
being selfish.
like the whole speech where he's talking to the what's her name when she got into college.
Yeah.
Like, no, you need to look out for number one. You need to look like you need to do what's right for you and not what's right for your family. And like she like her idea about like family and stuff was like completely opposite. And like it kind of showed how he got messed up by the system he was in. And like and that was sort of part of his arc where like he learned like, oh, like these people can help me like be a better person. And then you get the real pit, like it's kind of like the parallel between like the real life stuff and then they actually become superheroes and like can fight alongside him. And like it's kind of that payoff where like, oh, the family gets to all fight together. And it's like, oh.
And it was like fun. And I think, and that was another thing. Like I think this movie is just so fantastic because it just set everything up to just like feel, nothing felt off. And it didn't, there were no moments where I felt, oh my gosh, that person wouldn't do this. Or like, why are they, of course they're all, like, I didn't have the reaction of like, of course they're all fighting together because like, that's what you do. It was like, yes, that is exactly what was going to happen because they've been doing this whole time. They, without superpowers, are still with him. And then now is the moment where it all clicks. And then they still get to have the fun with, these are also kids with superpowers now.
Yeah, there's like a 5-year-old girl or how I don't know how old she was. She's like, what's a lair?
Yeah, and I love like the scene where she's like with Santa. She's like, I've been really good. You know, it's like but it's just like little moments like that where they still found
they
even
acknowledged
in that
like,
exactly. Like they at no point did they like drop the ball of remembering that these are all kids with something that they don't understand.
Yeah, and I think like because of the nature of the movie, they treaded the line so well between innocence and like childlikeness and like complete and utter horror. Yeah. Because like I don't remember exactly when it happened, but like there was this whole thing at the beginning where like they were showing him being a superhero for a while and kind of like all these like jokes where the whole theater would laugh and like we would all be having a fun time. And then all of a sudden hard cut to like this dude who's just like ravaging people and he chucks his brother out the window and kills his own father and like but then you cut back and Billy's having fun again and it's like they kind of like blend those two things of like complete and utter horror and this dude is trying to destroy the world. Yeah. And in a way it almost felt like they were making fun of the other DC movies because like they could have so easily leaned into that darkness and depravity
and made it for everybody
that the other movies have wanted to do. Yeah. But they like kept pulling it back. They kept pulling back towards the innocence and like the final fight scene where they're like literally fighting like the 7 deadly sins and it's just all these kids like having fun. Basically, what you'd expect.
That's a great point.
Like in a sense, like why aren't these kids scared? But it's like, oh, they have superpowers now, and like this is exactly what a kid would do if they all of a sudden had like super speed, flight, super strength. Like they're just having fun with it, and like they're just like and like jumping around and laughing, and like and she's just speeding around and saving people and running, and like they're just like goofing off and having fun while like these 7 demons are like trying to kill them. Right? Like, it's like the balance between like childlikeness and like horror was so like it made the movie feel different than almost anything we've gotten in a long time in a way. I don't know.
And I think that's a really interesting thing. And I feel like so this is what's really fun. And I feel like as we're diving in is there's a lot of stuff that I think is just so metaphorical and it's so tied to the deeper themes. Because as you were saying that, like that's a really good example. Because that's something where people could be, gripey and be like, well, how does a 5-year-old kid know how to fight demons? But I'm imagining like, okay, if when I was a 5-year-old kid, my brother and I were running around in the backyard with plastic swords, thinking we were fighting imaginary bad guys.
Yeah,
like,
me and my brothers
so of course,
were,
it's like we were envisioning how to do it. Did that mean we knew how to do it, or if like a ninja like popped in our backyard, we were gonna take him down? Like, no, that's stupid. But if all of a sudden this magic guy with his powers gave me this thing, I would probably be like, oh, I can run super fast? Well, I'm just going to do it. Where it's so weird that, and I think that's what's super cool is and I want to dive and sit in the horror scene a little bit because I think the boardroom scene is the counter side to this entire film, which was also incredible. Is the movie opens with, and so I'll kind of navigate the point through the examples, but the movie opens with the main villain, Thad. And
man, that opening scene was fantastic.
And I think that is what set the tone for this film. And I think if they hadn't started with that and they had started with Billy instead, I think it would have been good. But I think that opening scene with Thad as the main villain created this expectation of like, oh, this is and not only that, but I think it was like it's really intense. Like it's very dark, it's very creepy. There's a lot of like the subtle horrorness with everything going on.
Yep.
But then
like when she touches that door, like
yeah, exactly,
and just turns to dust. I'm like, oh, that was horrifying.
Yeah, that was creepy. But then even when Thad is a kid, he's a kid in this thing, and it's like in the same way, it was fascinating because they juxtaposed Thad as a kid who immediately goes to this eye thing, and he's like obsessed with it, and he becomes, and you can tell the way they build it up. This is a kid with a really sad life. Like you feel for him. Like he's not like a dweeby.
Yeah,
like
his dad was a d-bag.
Yeah, it's like you feel like I don't want this kid to be treated like this is horrible. Where I could see it being flubbed, where it's like his dad being like, "Want to go to the game spot?" And it's like he has this life that he should love. But it's this life that he hates that drives him to be like, I want the power to shut my dad up because I'm not good enough for him and my stupid older brother. And so then that setup of like, he has this really douchey family. And again, with that theme of family that's running through it, this is the product of a family that just treats you like dirt. And so he gets to the point where he gets the eye and he goes to, which this was a fun twist, is I thought his dad was dead. And so
I did too, yeah.
And so when he walks into this boardroom, and then all of a sudden, and they didn't. It was just, I'm just getting so stoked of like they didn't reveal it right out of the way. Where he's like, "Son, what are you doing here?" He walks in and he's like, "Thad," and you're like, "Oh, is this where he used to work, or is this like his thing or whatever?" And he comes in with just this persona, and you're like, "Dude, stuff is about to go down. Like this is gonna be intense."
Yep.
And he gets into this banter with this guy across the table, and then he's like, "Don't make," and then he just says a flippant comment, this guy in this wheelchair, he's like, "Don't make your brother have to do something he's going to regret." Or he just says something where you're like, oh, frick, he's in the family business, and he's about to turn it over.
Yep.
And so then he and his brother kind of get into it, and he's like, "Thad, don't make me do something." He's like, "Don't make me throw you out of here." And he's like, just go ahead. And he's like, "Wait, what? Like, Thad, this isn't funny." And I don't remember the exact sequence of dialogue, but he just grabs him.
I don't think he even said anything. I think he just grabbed him.
He just grabs him and chucks him out of skyscraper, like just through the window. And like
when that happened, I was like, "Oh wow,
yeah,
okay."
You're like nuts, man.
Because before that, I think it had been a lot of like funny scenes and like little montages and stuff where like, oh, lighthearted, yay, fun, and all of a sudden this happens and I'm like, oh.
And
that's not even the best of it.
Exactly. And what I loved is that and it's so subtle, but they didn't dwell on the fact of like him falling. Like it wasn't like, we're gonna follow him all the way to the ground, splat. It was just like he just gets chucked out and he's like, other demons. Like he's just on to the next thing immediately. Yep. And you can just tell. It's like, this is his brother. Like, he just murdered his brother by throwing him out a glass window.
Yep.
But he's just like, he's out of my head. He's done. On to the next thing. And 7 deadly sins start flying out of his eye, and he just murders this whole boardroom in this very horrific scene.
Yeah,
like
with the glass and like...
Yeah, and like...
And the guy's like...
This crowd of people, like, clawing on this, like, white pane glass. It was horrifying. Like, it was really creepy.
Yep.
But it was like... This is incredible. Like this is just such a cool scene. And then he goes over to his dad and he like takes all the other demons in, but then he's like, and there it is, Greed. He's like, Greed, you can have him, and just walks out. And this monster just eats his dad alive.
Yep.
And you're like, wow. And
then it cuts back to like silly.
Yeah. And then it's like,
stuff.
Dude, shoot me in the face. Like it was just like, oh my gosh. And so as you're bringing it up, I think what's such a fascinating subtext in this movie is you have a kid with a ruined childhood who's Thad, who becomes the villain, and you have Billy, who is arguably could be in a ruined childhood, being in the foster system and having his mom abandon him and running around trying to find her. You have these two different people, and the big reveal is that Billy starts out as like, no, he's not worthy. He's just like Thad was. He's just, this scrappy kid who doesn't understand anything. And so he's just going along with it. But then by the end, you're like, oh, he does get it. And he does earn the title of Shazam, being like, quote unquote, worthy, like a worthy champion. And I thought it's fascinating that all the scenes that Thad were in were more brutal and visceral and violent, but all the scenes that he wasn't in, they didn't inject that into it, because like you were saying, it's almost like they did this awesome segmentation of like, not that that can't be a thing, but they didn't force those kids to be in a brooding negative. Like I think of like some of the times that DC has done in like the Batman v Superman and other movies, where it's like the kids have this like, even like the kids are ornery, where you're like, why are you so
like they're not
glum?
normal kids?
Yeah, like they're not normal kids. And I think this just embraced like, no, they haven't been traumatized by, you know, this demon controlling guy trying to kill them. And as a result, like when they do face him, they have these superpowers now, so it's fine. But then when Thad comes in, all of a sudden Billy has to deal with, oh my gosh, there's a guy trying to kill me, and he can. And it shakes it up. And that's when he has to start wrestling and grappling with stuff. It isn't like, oh, I'm in a life or death situation, I guess I get it now. It just fit. It flowed together. And so you have Thad, who has a justifiable reason in terms of like, I don't like what you're doing, but I understand it. Like your dad was pretty verbally abusive, and you did all these things, and they really hate you, and like you just kind of murdered him. And it's not how I would have done it, but I understand, you know. And there's that payoff. There's this catharsis of like, that dad did suck, and that brother was a douche, but you're like, but that's not how you should do it. And it's like, oh, but then you go to Billy, and that's not how he's doing it either. He's doing his own different thing. And so it just felt like they weren't trying to pitch you like right answers. Like it was people on a journey.
I think the interesting thing about Thad too was like, I think in the boardroom they kind of fleshed it out a little bit, but like he's like, I'm not even mad that you were mean to me as a kid. It was more that you thought I was insane because like I believe this was real. And then he takes the sunglasses off, and like it's kind of like this story of a dude driven mad because he just wants to be like validated by like his family. Yeah. And it's not even that they were like D-bags to him. It's more that like they thought he was insane or like crazy. And like he spent his entire life, like 30 plus years, seeking out this power that he had gotten a taste of. And like he finally gets it. And I think it's interesting, the contrast between like Billy and this guy. They both kind of want the same thing in a sense. Like they want a normal family. They want whatever, and they're kind of like similar kids. But then Billy just gets the power thrust upon him, and this other dude spends 30 plus years trying to get it just so he can like take over. I don't even know what his ultimate goal was, but like he basically just, the first thing he did was kill his dad and his brother. So
well, and that's a good point. So as I'm thinking about it, his only goal was to get Shazam's power. And I think, and again, when you think about it, that deeper motivation, it wasn't like, now I have the 7 deadly sins, so I'm going to rule the world. It was just like, so now I'm on to the next power. I'm going to chase this down because that guy told me I wasn't good enough. And so I'm going to steal his power and prove him wrong. The whole movie, all his motivations were driven by, I was never good enough. I was never sufficient for anybody. I was never just accepted. Yeah. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to kill my dad and I'm going to kill my brother. And now I'm going on to this old dude. And he handed it off to this kid. So I'm going to find that kid and I'm going to steal his powers. It was all small scale from that perspective. And yeah, there's like flying through the city and like, it's not terms of that kind of like the area they cover, but literally emotionally. It wasn't, he didn't just all of a sudden jump to like world domination, like, which sounds super cliche, but I think of all the movies that we've seen where it's like, there's no build up to that. There's no progression. It's just like, no, he has no reason to. Like, he wasn't like, oh, the world hated me, so now I'm going to kill everybody.
Yeah, it wasn't the world who hated him. It was just his
dad. These specific people. And those were the people that he went after. And so
like, his search for power was a natural progression of his like feeling small and not having power when he was a kid.
Definitely.
And he almost like, and maybe we missed this, but he almost didn't really like have a real goal in mind for once he got the power, or at least he didn't really make it known. Right. And so maybe we could just assume that he wanted to, like,
he would do something
take
like
over
that.
the world. But like that never seemed to be what his motivation was. His motivation was kind of like getting the power was the motivation. And he didn't really like know what to do with it when he got it. And that's almost like a deep psychological need because maybe of his childhood or whatever. And I'm not a psychologist, but that's kind of like what it seemed like they were doing in a sense.
And I wonder if that's where, because I feel like with horror movies, that's kind of what you're grappling with, is you're messing with people's psychology because you're trying to scare them. Like, and you don't do that by just like, you know, telling a ghost story. Like, the reason those things are scary and they mess with you is because it all of a sudden starts plaguing on your fears. It starts messing with your insecurities and the things. And so it almost seems like maybe I just need to start practicing writing horror. Is like, it seemed like because this was coming from a horror director who has done horror movies, he had this understanding of storytelling that he adapted to a superhero film. And like, the goals aren't grandiose. Like in a horror movie.
The goals are things that like, oh, we could become like that kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Like psychological
Exactly.
horror where like, the only thing separating them from us is this world has supernatural things
Exactly.
that like you could wield kind of.
Definitely.
So,
yeah, and so there's this kind of play with bringing in the basic psychological things that drive us to do things, and then telling a story with those and how those affect us, and what happens when that's thrust upon an insecure 15-year-old and a crazed 30-year-old and all this stuff.
Yep.
So I don't know, man. We could ramble on forever, but I feel like that's a good synopsis of everything else I'd run through is just kind of like very basic things that just felt fun. Like I loved the family. All the characters of the family were a lot of fun. I didn't feel like I hated anybody else in the movie. Like there was the people I wasn't supposed to like, I didn't like. The people I was supposed to love, I really loved. The story was just so natural. The depth to it is, as we've been talking, it's just been unraveling itself more. And I think it was just well made. It was just an incredibly simple, well made movie. And it just capitalized on everything I thought they would have, and I felt that they should have. And not to say what I expected Shazam to do, but what they were setting up in the movie, they always paid off, it felt like. And maybe I'm missing things and people will have things to say about that. But I feel like from my perspective, every single thing that they set up or started addressing or playing with, some character was also wrestling or playing with that same thing. Like there weren't like competing things where all of a sudden like, well, Billy doesn't care about like family anymore. He cares about like this thing or this thing. Like they allude to some of that stuff. Well, all of a sudden he's like taking pictures for money, but like he's doing it because like he hasn't had attention or he's like not loved. And everybody was wrestling with the same stuff and everybody was dealing with it differently. And they put the two main characters and the protagonist and the antagonist against each other and how they were dealing with the same thing. And I think that to me was just like fundamental storytelling that it was just so well done.
Yep. I agree.
So,
yeah.
Any other thoughts? Any closing remarks?
I don't know. If you haven't seen the movie, I think you need to see it.
Go see it. Go see it.
And maybe it's just refreshing because we've watched so many bad movies. But like thinking about the movie in the terms of what we have watched, like I think in Rendell I talked about how like you could tell exactly you could tell when scenes were scenes. Yeah. And in this movie you couldn't necessarily tell which scenes were scenes, and you could like it was a cohesive story that told everything it needed to tell. And like you said, it alluded to things that maybe could play out in further films and stuff, but like everything that they set up as like needing resolve got resolved by the end of the movie and in a satisfying way, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think it definitely deserves the 90%. So,
definitely. Yeah. Cool. So that is the final rundown on Shazam. Definitely go see it in theaters. It's a fun ride. Well worth it.
Give DC your money for this one.
Yeah. I 100%, like, this is one of those movies where it's like, please go see it just because tell them that this is the movie that's good. Yeah. Like, tell them that.
And I have no doubt this movie's going to crush it.
I hope so.
Because Aquaman beat 1 mil, I think. So if this movie could do the same, like
and especially if it's getting good ratings. Yeah. So I really hope
more horror directors. That seems
right,
to work.
Exactly. So I'm serious. There's part of me where it's like maybe I just need to start practicing like horror writing to see if that kind of trains me on like more fundamental stuff. But anyway, so highly recommend it. Really, this makes me back into DC, and we forgot to mention that like the Joaquin Phoenix Joker trailer. Did you watch it?
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
I'm really excited for that.
This flick looks nuts, and I am unbelievably excited.
I'm excited for more like DC like Elseworlds type stories where like let's just take a character and tell a crazy story. It doesn't have to be connected. Doesn't have to be anything. Like let's do a character study, and that's exactly what Joker looks like.
Yeah, and some of the actors that popped up I think are all from Atlanta too. Really? So I was like, yes, they might be going for that like surrealist kind of weird like creepy vibe, which is exactly what Atlanta conjures. So dude, I'm excited, unbelievably excited. If this is where DC is headed and they just kind of table the whole extended universe nonsense, dudes, like just make one-off movies like this. Like or tell a contained, like do it like kind of how you do in the comics. It seems.
Only do like the extended universe stuff when you deserve to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if anything,
because I would love to see Shazam and Superman be in the same movie at some point,
right?
And like interact, because it would be hilarious.
Yes.
And we got a little taste of that at the end.
Definitely.
But
And there's things that they could do, and there's really cool things that I think like there are other narratives I feel like they could tell that it's like just do kind of what the Nolan trilogy did in a way, where it's just like just tell a couple movies with this specific Batman, tell a couple movies with this specific Shazam, tell a couple Superman movies. Aquaman
I would
stuff.
take an all-star Superman movie.
Yes.
Like a lighthearted, like basically like the tone of Shazam. Like I want Superman to be the Boy Scout. I want him to like be the nice guy and like not brooding and like believes in everybody sort of guy, but like ramp it up with the Grant Morrison style. Like a movie like that I think would be dope.
Yeah, and I really hope that they do.
I feel like DC's in the right trajectory at this point.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I guess we'll see with the Joker, and that one's probably going to be dark, but I think...
But it's meant to be.
Yeah, it's meant to be.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm excited.
Absolutely. So on that note, thanks for tuning in to Shazam. I will put a note of where the spoilers start. It's probably a good idea to just, if you haven't seen it yet, just go see it. And then come listen to it.
Yeah.
But if you would like to send this along to your friend who has seen it and hopefully get us out there, you can send them a link to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, or Spotify. That is where all our episodes are hosted. You can follow the podcast show on Instagram and Twitter at Pop Culture Punks. Phil and I are also on Twitter at I am Phil Sorensen and JK and Pop Culture. We also have, I think I said Instagram, right? Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for Pop Culture Punks.
Yeah, buddy.
And then Phil's also on Insta at I am Phil Sorensen. The show email is popculturepunks@gmail.com. Please, 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 please. We're going to start planning this coming weekend. So if you have any ideas for episodes and stuff, shoot them our way. We'd love to hear any ideas, especially I know the industry's been kind of getting shaken up with some of the things that have been going on in gaming and movies, and now DC is doing well. Endgame is right around the corner. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
The world may never know. But yeah, so send us any ideas. We'd love to hear from you guys. And yeah, that's that. We've got some new merch on Redbubble and Threadless, so check that out to help support the show. Next week, we will be talking Spider-Man, the PlayStation 4 game, which
I'm
is
excited
going
for
to
that.
be a lot of fun. And the following week after that, we will be discussing
Batman Ninja, I believe.
Batman Ninja. That's correct. And then end of the month,
Endgame.
Oh,
so it's gonna be the month of heroes.
We're gonna be
a lot of posi-vibes.
It's gonna be April is gonna be some posi-vibes, which I'm really excited for.
March was the month of the critics.
Yes, the months
the negative vibes.
Mad March. I don't know.
Mad March.
Mad March kind of fits. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your listens. Be sure to send with your friends, share reviews and stuff on any of the platforms that you listen on. It really helps us get out there. And that's it. But until then, we bid you a fond Shazam!
Job security, but I've been dreaming about packing it all up, cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head? And I wanna burn out in a brilliant burning blaze, don't wanna be stifled by the dry rot or the haze. Giving up, I just don't have the time to waste all my days rewriting all these lies. I'm not giving up, I just don't have the time to spend another moment living someone else's life. stone